You're just a janitor. You don't belong in our world." Those words echoed across a boardroom where suits judge more than numbers, and a little girl's future hung in silence. But what happens when the man they dismiss, the one who scrubs their floors, becomes the only person who truly sees her? What happens when a man with nothing left refuses to walk away? Before we dive in, let me know. What time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Rowan Keats stirred awake before the alarm. The apartment itself kept time for him. The upstairs pipes clattered when the neighbor ran the shower, and the old refrigerator gave a throaty hum like it was clearing itself. He swung his legs off the mattress, kneaded the back of his neck, and tugged on a faded t-shirt before stepping the few paces into the kitchen. He cracked eggs into a dented pan, careful with the spatula, so the sound wouldn't rouse Ellie too soon. The cabinet scratched but orderly carried a stubborn dignity. On the counter, a single mug released steam from strong instant coffee, its bitterness cutting through the morning chill. Ellie patted out in socks, hair in wild tufts, eyes still heavy. "Pancakes," she asked hopefully. "Eggs today," Rowan answered, sliding the plate her way. His smile was gentle but strained, as if holding it steady took effort. She climbed onto the chair legs, swinging, and ate without protest. While she chewed, his eyes drifted to the shelf above the table. A chipped frame rested there, his wife's frozen smile locked in time. He let out a breath, slowly, almost inaudible, then turned toward the window. His own reflection stared back, blurred at the edges, like a man still half absent. Ellie's voice broke the pull. "Daddy, the eggs are good." He brushed a crumb from her cheek. "Glad you think so, Bug." The grin remained, though the weight in his chest stayed rooted. When the plates were empty, he cleared them swiftly. The faucet gave a squeal as cold water splashed over his hands. On the counter, the small radio carried a polished announcer's voice, news of a biotech institute opening downtown, funded by a celebrated CEO. Words like visionary leader and untouchable empire filled the kitchen until Rowan twisted the knob, dropping the room back into silence. His jaw tightened. He packed Ellie's backpack, tucked her lunchbox in, and zipped the worn fabric with practiced ease. Shoes tied, jackets buttoned, they stepped into the hall, where the air smelled faintly of dust and last night's dinners from other apartments. Seattle pulsed with urgency. Commuters pressed forward, buses sighed exhaust into the gray morning. Rowan clasped Ellie's hand as they crossed near the corner store. She tilted her face up, her voice carrying lightly above the traffic. "I dream Mommy painted the sky blue." His steps faltered. Breath caught, and for a heartbeat the block seemed to hush. Then he squeezed her small hand and kept moving, folding them both back into the current of strangers. After dropping Ellie at school, Rowan arrived at the tower with the same quiet ritual that framed his mornings. The floor in the main lobby was always spotless by 8 a.m. His unspoken rule. He liked the rhythm, the steady drag of the mop, the clean line of water drying into shine. This early, the place was still stretching awake, not yet crowded with the noise of business. He worked his way around the sculpture at the center, a twisting metal form that seemed desperate to break free from itself, and glimpsed his reflection, warped in the steel. Faint, fragmented, gone with each movement. Behind him passed a pair of glossy dress shoes, then heels clicking sharply, then others in succession. None of them slowed. No one ever glanced down. Rowan returned to his cart, adjusted the cleaner, and steered toward the elevator bank. The tall windows bled pale Seattle light across the marble, yet the air felt locked tight, chilled by too much glass and restraint. The scream came, then high, sudden, piercing, even through the hum of the espresso machine nearby. Rowan snapped his head up. A girl 6, maybe 7, crouched by the front desk, hands clamped over her ears. Her shoulders shook, blonde hair falling across her face as she rocked, knees pulled to her chest, whispering too quickly to follow. The lobby froze. A woman backed away and fumbled for her phone. A man in a suit hesitated, then pressed forward as if nothing had happened. A security guard started toward the child, then faltered, hand hovering near the radio on his belt, caught between duty and hesitation. Rowan stepped without thinking. The guard caught his arm. "Hey, no," he muttered. "Not your place. Stay clear." Rowan studied the girl. Laces undone, breathing shallow. The start of a spiral he knew too well. "Let me try," he said. The guard stayed rooted. Rowan eased past anyway, lowering himself to one knee a few feet away, deliberate and calm. He reached into the cart, drew out a small bottle of dish soap, dipped his hand into the rinse bucket, rubbed his palms together, then lifted them and blew. The first bubble floated free, careless of the tension gripping the room. Violet and gold shimmered under the lights. Then another, and another. The girl stilled. Her fingers loosened. She blinked through the veil of hair. One bubble landed on her knee and burst with a soft pop. She didn't flinch. The lobby hushed deeper. Conversations thinned. Even the barista froze pitchers suspended mid-pour. Rowan kept sending bubbles, drifting each one a small answer to her panic. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. On the mezzanine, movement halted. Cambria Rhoades stood at the railing, gray suit, crisp hair, knotted tight arms folded. Her gaze swept the lobby and fixed on the scene below. Her daughter, there was no mistaking the resemblance, now sat cross-legged, eyes following the bubbles with fragile focus. Cambria lingered, unreadable, then descended the wide staircase, each step measured. Staff shifted aside, watching her path to Rowan. She crouched briefly beside the girl. "Iris," she said evenly. The child looked up, breathing steadier. Cambria checked her hands, then straightened lips, pressed thin. Without turning to Rowan, she addressed the guard. "Name Rowan Keats," the guard answered, uneasy. "Janitorial team." Only then did she meet Rowan's eyes. No gratitude showed there, only calculation and something more elusive. Perhaps fatigue forced into discipline. "Mr. Keats," she said, "come with me." He rose, drying his palms against the back of his pants. "Ma'am," the guard blurted, trailing he didn't have clearance. "He'll come with me." Cambria cut in, already striding toward the elevator. Rowan followed. The ride upward passed in silence, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He kept his gaze forward. She didn't speak. The elevator climbed like it was holding its breath. As the doors closed behind them, the guard's warning slipped through the narrowing gap. "You just bought yourself a problem." The doors sealed shut, steel swallowing them whole. The elevator released a quiet chime as it reached the top floor. Rowan stepped out into a corridor so still it felt insulated from sound. No footsteps, no echoes. Just the whisper of central air through hidden vents. At the end of the hallway, a glass-walled office revealed Cambria Rhoades seated behind a desk that gleamed with everything but warmth. She didn't lift her eyes right away, fingers moving with practiced precision over her tablet. The silence stretched deliberate. "Mr. Keats," she said at last, gaze flicking up. "Have a seat." Two chairs waited across from her, both too low to be comfortable. Rowan chose one, lowering himself cautiously, hands uncertain until he flattened them against his knees. Cambria set the tablet aside and laced her fingers. "Who taught you that?" He blinked. "Taught me what the bubble thing," she replied. "With Iris." "You're not a psychologist, not licensed. So why did you think that was appropriate?" Her tone wasn't cruel but clinical, as though evaluating a failed experiment. "I didn't think," he answered slowly. "I recognized the signs. I've seen them before. I used to teach kids with sensory processing issues." That gave her pause. Her eyes sharpened. "We're middle school in Tacoma. 7 years. And now you mop floors." The question was meant to cut. Perhaps it did, but Rowan didn't flinch. Life changed. She didn't press further, though the quiet between them carried weight. "My wife died 2 years ago," he added, voice low. "I left teaching. Needed steadier hours, something I could manage while raising my daughter." A faint tick shifted in her jaw. "Iris is nonverbal," she said. Light, sound, even temperature overwhelm her. "Every specialist we've tried, she shuts them out." Rowan tilted his head. "Maybe she doesn't need a specialist. Maybe she needs someone who doesn't talk at her." Her brows lifted slightly, the first crack in her composure. "Be that as it may," she said, rising from her chair. "What you did worked. I don't know why, and I don't need to, but I intend to use it." She moved to the floor-to-ceiling window, arms folded at her waist. Beyond the glass, the city sprawled, cranes, high-rises, countless parts pretending to be in control. "You'll meet with her once a week. Mornings. My assistant will schedule. Use the North Wing observation room. No one needs to see you with her." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Is this part of my job now?" "You'll be compensated," she said without turning. "But it isn't about you. My daughter comes first." He stood. "I never asked for it to be about me." Cambria finally faced him. Beneath the polish and calculation, something flickered, fear disguised as discipline or exhaustion wearing heels. Then it was gone. "I'll do it," Rowan said. She nodded briskly. "Dismissed." The glass door hissed closed behind him. He didn't look back. The corridor stretched long on the way out, muted its stillness, clinging to his shoulders like the scent of floor polish in his uniform. When the elevator opened to the lobby, sound returned in layers. Voices overlapping heels, clicking across tile, the low churn of the coffee grinder. He passed the same sculpture still twisting in its unresolved contortion. Near the revolving doors, a wide pane of glass threw back his image. Hair damp from steam uniform creased sleeves shoved too high. Behind him, the crowd flowed pressed and polished while he remained motionless at its center. Then he stepped through the door into the gray morning. By the time dust settled, steam rose from two chip bowls on the table, curling toward the flickering kitchen light. Rowan sat across from Ellie, their chairs nearly touching in the cramped space. He had added a pinch of parsley to the top of the canned soup, just enough to make it look like effort. Ellie slurped a spoonful, then leaned back with a soft sigh. "I made something today," she said between bites. Rowan glanced up from his bowl. "What kind of something? A picture?" She reached for her glass and sipped. It was for a friend. He blinked. "You mean for Ms. Alder?" "No," Ellie said, swiping her sleeve across her mouth. "For Iris." His spoon stilled. "You saw her again?" "She was sitting alone during art." Ellie explained, chewing thoughtfully. "I gave her my rainbow drawing. She didn't talk, but she stared at it a long time." Rowan studied her expression. Her voice wasn't uncertain, just careful, as if guarding something delicate. "And now she's your friend?" Ellie's face lit. "I think so. She gave me something back." Before he could ask what, his phone buzzed across the table. He snatched it up. "Building manager, work contact." His stomach sank. "Keep eating, sweetie," he murmured, stepping into the hall. He answered. "Mr. Keats," the manager began without pause. "A report came through today. Mentions you directly, unauthorized personal contact with a member of the Rhoades family." Rowan's throat tightened. "I was asked to. Cambria arranged it herself." "I'm not questioning intent," the manager cut in. "Just letting you know it's on record now. We'll need written clearance if this continues. Chain of command liability, you understand?" "Yeah," Rowan muttered. "Thanks for letting me know." He hung up, leaning against the wall. The apartment suddenly felt compressed, as though the rooms had drawn closer. The phone buzzed again, this time a message. "Cambria. Limit all contact to designated times. Do not be seen with her outside scheduled sessions. Understood." No greeting, no context. Just authority, sharp and clipped. He read it once, then again, a third time. For a while he stood in the dim hall, listening to Ellie's spoon scrape against porcelain. When he returned to the kitchen, she looked up, chewing her lip. "Did you get in trouble?" "Sort of," he admitted. "But it's fine. Nothing for you to worry about." Ellie didn't seem convinced. She slipped a hand into her hoodie pocket and drew something out, hiding it in her fist. "I wanted to show you after dinner," she whispered. "I didn't want anyone else to see." Her fingers unfolded, revealing a stub of blue crayon wrapper torn halfway. "She gave it to me," Ellie said. Iris didn't speak, but she put it in my hand, then curled my fingers shut, like it was a secret. Rowan took it carefully. The wax was worn grooves pressed deep where small hands had held too hard. His chest ached. "She smiled," Ellie added. "Just for a second. But I saw it." Rowan looked from her to the message glowing on his screen. He turned the phone face down. The air thickened between them. Ellie slurped again, then pushed her bowl aside and rested her chin on her arms, watching the crayon as though it might vanish. Rowan stayed motionless. One hand on the table, the other closing gently around the bit of blue. The city beyond still surged forward. He didn't know the name of the weight pressing on him. Not fear, not guilt. Something between, the strain of being pulled in two directions by the flicker of a child's smile. Ellie yawned, eyelids heavy. Rowan smoothed her hair with his palm. The crayon remained on the table, a fragile bridge between what they both understood and what no one else seemed willing to see. A few days later, the slide screeched under Ellie's weight as she zipped down, landing in a pile of wood chips. Rowan chuckled from the bench nearby, his thermos cradled in one hand. Late afternoon light streaked through the trees, dusting everything in amber. He looked up when quick footsteps struck the path. A tall man in a dark blazer scanned the playground, then stepped aside as a girl passed, calm, deliberate eyes fixed straight ahead. Iris. Headphones covered her ears, a glittery plastic notebook hugged to her chest. Another man followed close, broad-shouldered with a square jaw and an earpiece coiled behind one ear. Security. Rowan tensed. He stayed seated on the bench, but his frame shifted, protective, without thought. Ellie hadn't noticed she was crouched near the sandbox, stacking twigs into a small house. Iris lingered only a few yards away, watching. She moved closer. One step, then another. Ellie looked up. Rowan's breath hitched as the girls faced each other. Ellie brushed her palms clean, stood and met Iris halfway. No words, just a simple exchange. Ellie drew something from her pocket, maybe a bead, maybe a leaf, and Iris tilted her head as she accepted it. The moment was small, fragile, perfect. Until the guard strode forward. "That's enough," he barked, thrusting an arm like a barrier voice too sharp for the quiet space. Parents turned. Murmurs swept the playground. A mother pulled her child closer. "Isn't that the CEO's daughter?" someone whispered. Another voice cut sharper. "Why's a janitor's kid near her?" Rowan rose slowly, hands raised. "It's fine. They're just talking." "I said back off," the guard snapped. "No photos, no contact." "I didn't take a photo. I wasn't even." The man advanced a step. "Do not engage with Miss Rhoades without authorized supervision. Final warning." Rowan's reply caught in his throat. The stares around him stole the air. Phones were raised, brows lifted, one father shaking his head. Ellie shrank, worry clouding her face. Iris froze, her eyes darting between the adults. Rowan crouched to Ellie's level. "It's okay, honey, we're leaving." He helped her gather her things, but before they stepped away, his phone buzzed. "Gregory Brandt. Incoming call." He let it ring twice, then answered. "I told Cambria this would happen," Gregory's voice hissed. "I warned her about letting you play therapist. Now the internet's circling stories about a janitor lurking near her kid." "I didn't do anything wrong." "Perception matters more than truth," Gregory snapped. "You've just become a liability, Mr. Keats." The line went dead. The conference room reeked of money and unease. Gregory stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled, a digital board glowing behind him, though no one was watching. Cambria sat rigid to his right, expression carved from stone. "We already have PR partners flagging the playground video," Gregory said, voice low but sharp. "Even without faces, it's enough. The janitor is now a public emblem of carelessness." A murmur slid through the room. One executive cleared her throat. Another scribbled notes. Cambria remained silent. Gregory turned toward Rowan, who stood alone near the door. "You put her daughter in the spotlight. You made her vulnerability a headline. For what?" A crayon and a half smile. Rowan's chest tightened. Gregory's stare cut deep. "You don't belong here. You never did." Something raw pressed Rowan's throat, but he swallowed it. Cambria's eyes flicked to him, not soft, not cold, just watching. Gregory pushed on. "If this continues, I'll bring it to the board. Rhoades Biogen cannot afford unvetted staff tangled in family matters." Rowan gave no reply. He stepped out, leaving the conversation to continue without him. The lobby's glass doors whispered open. Rowan stepped into the street as the sun slid, low shadows stretching long between the buildings. His uniform carried a faint smear of paint from some closet. The collar scratched his neck. He left it alone. Pedestrians hurried past, polished and distracted. He paused at the curb, glancing up toward the windows above one belonging to the room he had just left. A man brushed by, muttering into his phone. Rowan turned and walked on. A gust of wind cut beneath his collar. Sunlight struck his face, warm yet sharp, but he shivered all the same. By the weekend, the library was quieter than usual. Most of the chairs sat empty, and the ticking of the wall clock felt louder than it should have. Rowan sat cross-legged on the carpet beside Ellie, who leaned against him, absorbed in her picture book. She whispered each word, tracing the letters with her finger. Rowan didn't correct her rhythm. He liked hearing her voice move carefully through the story. A soft breath of air stirred the doorway. He glanced up. Cambria Rhoades stood just beyond the biography shelf. She didn't look like the woman he'd grown used to. No heels, no blazer. Her hair was loosely tied, stray strands falling at her temples. She wore a long gray sweater and dark jeans, clothes that might pass unnoticed if you weren't accustomed to seeing her polished. For a moment, Rowan stayed silent. She seemed out of place but not uneasy, more like someone who had stepped beyond a boundary of her own making. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, voice barely above the hush of the room. Rowan gestured toward the empty chair across from them. "Depends on your definition of interrupting." Cambria gave a faint smile and sat. Her posture remained straight but less rigid than usual, fingers clasped in her lap. Ellie peeked up, offered a shy wave, then bent over her drawing again. "Iris slept last night," Cambria said without preamble. Rowan tilted his head. "She hasn't done that in 3 years. Not without medication. Not without waking up screaming." She paused, glancing toward the children's section. "But last night, there was nothing. Only steady breathing." It felt her voice caught for a heartbeat, like having my daughter back. Rowan didn't answer. Some truths were too heavy for comfort. She mentioned the blue crayon, Cambria added, said it turned the clouds in her dreams soft instead of loud. Rowan gave a slow nod, uncertain how to meet metaphors that felt truer than facts. Her tone lowered. Daniel Vale filed for custody. The name dropped like a stone in Rowan's chest. Iris's biological father. He's resurfaced. He claims I've lost judgment, that allowing a maintenance worker into her life proves I'm unfit. Rowan drew in a sharp breath through his nose. "He's armed with lawyers," Cambria continued. "Money. A fiancé with a spotless record and a PR perfect smile. He's building his story, and I'm beginning to wonder if I've already lost the middle chapters." Her voice stayed even. She wasn't asking for pity, but her fingers tightened slightly where they rested. "I thought you should know," she said, "because if this reaches court, your name won't just be in passing." Rowan's thoughts raced Ellie at school, the small apartment, unpaid bills stacked in a drawer he never opened. "You think they'll come after me?" he asked quietly. "They'll go after anything that paints me as careless," she replied. "And right now, that includes you." Ellie giggled at her drawing, breaking the weight in the air. She turned the notebook toward Rowan, 3 figures sitting on a couch, each with a book. One tall in a blue shirt, one in gray, the smallest in pink between them. Cambria glanced, then looked away. Rowan ran a finger down the page. "She thinks we're part of something." "Iris does too," Cambria said. "She doesn't speak it, but I see it when she waits for you." The calm after. Rowan laid the notebook down, eyes lingering on the stub of blue crayon Ellie had used. "I didn't ask for this," he murmured. "I only wanted to keep my daughter safe. Keep life simple." Cambria gave a slight shrug. "Neither did I." They sat in silence, weight pressing down between them, while Ellie's legs tucked beneath her added a smudge of green across her chin, without noticing. Cambria stood brushing dust from her jeans. "I'm not asking for anything tonight," she said. "I just thought you deserved the truth before it shows up in court." She turned toward the exit, her steps muffled by the carpet. Rowan let her go. He leaned back, gaze still on Ellie's drawing. She nestled against him, warm and small. Her fingers returned to the page, and with slow care she added a 4th figure in the corner, just a pale gray outline. No features yet. Still deciding who or what it might be. A week later, the air carried the scent of damp soil and blooming thyme. The community garden had begun to stir with spring marigolds, snapdragons, wild lettuce reaching toward the sun. Rowan pressed his hands into the soil, loosening it until the cool earth crumbled easily between his fingers. Next to him, Ellie knelt with exaggerated care, pressing a basil seedling into the soil as though it might break. "This one's mine," she whispered, glancing toward Iris. Iris said nothing. She was busy lining petals along the planter's edge, arranging them by shade yellow into pink blue, fading into violet. Now and then she glanced sideways at Ellie, not quite smiling, but choosing not to leave. A few feet away, Cambria stood with her sleeves pushed past her elbows, a trowel in one hand and a bag of mulch in the other. The heels and sharp jackets were gone. Sneakers and a charcoal sweater made her look smaller, less armored, almost ordinary. Rowan leaned back on his heels, watching Ellie press another label into the dirt. "You've got a good touch," he murmured. "Plants like gentle hands. I learned from you." She beamed, unaware of how deeply her words tugged at him. Cambria stepped closer and offered Rowan a water bottle. "She's steady," she said, nodding toward Ellie. "You can tell she's used to being heard." Their fingers brushed as he accepted it. "We try," he answered. She crouched beside Iris and helped her shape a new circle of petals, white daisies, this time set down in perfect order. For a fleeting moment, the scene felt borrowed from a different life, the kind Rowan once imagined, when classrooms and lesson plans filled his days instead of solvents and machines. Iris suddenly rose and crossed to Ellie, offering a single tulip petal like a gift. Ellie slipped it into her sketchbook and pressed it flat between the pages. "They're like sisters," Cambria whispered. Rowan stayed quiet, watching Iris hum softly, her tune fragile yet clear. The garden itself seemed to pause. "She changes here," he said. "She feels safe here," Cambria replied. Across the street, half hidden behind ivy, a man in a denim jacket adjusted his camera lens. The shutter clicked once, twice, capturing Cambria mid-laugh. Her hand grazing Rowan's sleeve, the two girls crouched close, knees streaked with soil. He packed the camera away and melted back into weekend foot traffic. Unaware, Ellie hurried over with a worm curled in her palms. "Can we keep him?" Rowan laughed, freer than he had in weeks. "Worms belong in the dirt, bug. That's where they do their work." "Then I'll name him anyway," she declared, setting the worm near her basil. "Benny. Benny the basil worm." Cambria let out a breath of amusement and lowered herself onto the grass. She looked worn, not from boardrooms or PR tours, but from holding too many delicate pieces together at once. "You ever wish you could stay in a place like this forever?" Rowan asked, half to himself. Her lips curved faintly. "Every day. And never." Their eyes met longer than they should have, until Ellie called out, "Iris, come see the worm." Iris hesitated, then crossed the lawn, crouching beside Ellie with cautious curiosity. Rowan watched them both, his chest pulling in opposite directions, ache and hope at once. For that one Saturday, nothing felt broken. Later, as streetlights blinked on and shadows pooled over the garden, Gregory Brandt sat in his office scrolling through messages. One subject line caught his eye. "Thought you'd want to see this." The attachment showed Cambria, grinning, sleeves rolled, kneeling on the grass beside a janitor and two girls with dirt on their knees. Her head tilted toward Rowan, the space between them too easy. Gregory didn't smile. He forwarded the image to the executive thread with a single line: "We have a problem." The headline exploded across morning news feeds before Rowan had even poured Ellie's cereal. He saw it on the neighbor's phone in the elevator, then again on a glowing screen at the convenience store near the bus stop. It was everywhere by the time they reached school. CEO Cambria Rhoades spotted in intimate setting with janitor and children. "What's the real story?" The photo was sharp, almost gentle Cambria. Kneeling in dirt, Rowan by her side, the girls between them. The garden, the colors, the angle, it looked staged. Deliberate. It wasn't. But the world didn't care. He dropped Ellie off with a quick hug. She didn't let go right away. "You're not in trouble, right?" she asked, eyes squinting against the sun. "No," he lied, smoothing her hair. "Everything's fine." She nodded, but her hand lingered in his until the very last second. By the time Rowan clocked in, the whispers had already started. No one said anything to his face, but heads turned. Conversations hushed when he passed. Phones weren't subtle enough. The air had changed. Upstairs, the mood was colder. Cambria stood at the end of a long glass table surrounded by board members in dark suits. Gregory Brandt sat opposite her, elbows wide, voice low, but slicing through the room. "This is a crisis of optics," he said, tapping a copy of the printed headline. "And crises demand action. What's being questioned here isn't just your judgment. It's your ability to maintain professional boundaries." Cambria said nothing at first. Her arms stayed at her sides, rigid. The line of her jaw never moved. "It was an off-duty moment," she finally said. "On private time. Nothing was improper." Gregory scoffed. "Private moments don't exist when your name runs a company worth $8 billion. This isn't about your feelings, Cambria. It's about control, or your lack of it." A murmur passed through the room. No one defended her. He leaned forward. "You'll release a statement, clarify the man as a contract janitor, and deny any personal involvement. From this point forward, keep him out of sight. No more community interaction." She stared at the photo on the table. A beat passed. Then she nodded once, barely perceptible. Across town, Rowan stood outside Ellie's school at pickup. She came out slowly, shoulders low, not like herself. "They made fun of me," she said quietly as they walked toward the bus stop. A boy said you're trying to marry her, that you're just pretending to be someone important. He stopped walking. She didn't look up. What did you say back? I said you used to be a teacher, that you help Iris, that you're good. But they laughed. One said, I only have friends because her mom is rich. They called me janitor's girl, like it's bad. He didn't know what to say. His throat burned with words that had nowhere to go. At home, Ellie retreated to her room. No sketching, no humming. She just curled under her blanket and asked if she could skip dinner. Rowan stared at the stovetop for a long time before turning the burner off. Later that evening, a message landed on his phone. It was from someone in maintenance. Just one line, she's going to lose everything because of you. That's what they're saying upstairs. He sat down hard on the couch as if the message had weight. Cambria could lose everything, not because of her work, her ethics, or her numbers, but because he was too close, too visible. Rowan's eyes drifted to the fridge. A crayon drawing still clung there beneath a heart-shaped magnet. 3 stick figures, 2 small ones holding hands, one taller with a beard. All of them smiling beneath a sun with a face. His fingers tightened against his scalp, breath coming shallow. Ellie's face flashed in his memory the way she'd flinched when she repeated those words, still so young, already carrying the weight of unfairness. His chest clenched. Shame tangled with helplessness until it was hard to tell one from the other. He wanted to fix something, anything, but all he could do was sit in the low hum of their apartment, willing his hands to steady enough for breath to come. By the time the summons arrived, there was no room left for denial. The conference room felt colder than it should have. Frosted glass walls dulled the sounds of conversation, though tension still vibrated under the fluorescent lights. Rowan sat near the back half in shadow, not inside the circle, but not completely apart from it either. His hands locked together in his lap palms, damp. Across the long table, Daniel Vale adjusted his cufflinks with the precision of a surgeon. Everything about him was sharp, his posture, his suit, his voice. Cambria Rhoades, he began, has repeatedly demonstrated negligence in parental oversight, allowing unlicensed individuals, unvetted, to have direct and unsupervised contact with our daughter. He slid a folder across the polished surface. Legal paperwork meticulously prepared. The custody petition was official now. She has involved a janitor, Daniel added, eyes flicking toward Rowan with practiced disdain, in the private therapeutic care of a child with a complex developmental profile. There are no certifications, no professional oversight, no accountability. Gregory Brandt, seated at his right, made no effort to hide his approval. A half smile tugged his lips, fingers drumming the table one step closer to removing Cambria from both her family and her company. Cambria remained still. Her face betrayed nothing but her left thumb pressed a slow circle into her palm beneath the table. Rowan didn't speak. He had nothing that couldn't be turned against him in that room. The judge, a gray-haired woman with piercing, world-weary eyes, leaned slightly forward. Is the child here today, no, Your Honor? Daniel replied. But I believe the facts speak clearly. There was a shuffle near the back row. Ellie stood, her small frame dwarfed by the room's authority. She clutched something in both hands, a folded paper creased at the corners. She wanted me to bring this, Ellie said. Her voice didn't shake. She said it's how she wanted to tell the court. Cambria blinked for the first time in minutes. Iris, seated beside Ellie, didn't lift her head, but her hand reached for the side of her chair, just barely grazing Ellie's sleeve. The judge gave a cautious nod. Let's see it. Ellie unfolded the drawing with careful fingers. Crayon lines filled the page, uneven and bold. In the center stood 3 figures, 2 adults and a child holding hands beneath a bright blue sky. One figure wore a long coat, another had messy brown hair, and the smallest stood between them, arms stretched wide. She said this is her safe place, Ellie explained. It's the first time she drew herself smiling. The room froze. Gregory's tapping stopped. Daniel's nostrils flared. Rowan couldn't breathe. The judge stared at the drawing for a long moment before nodding to the court reporter. Please enter this as Exhibit C. Daniel leaned forward. Your Honor, this is not admissible evidence. It's an emotional stunt orchestrated by Ms. Rhoades. No one coached her, Cambria cut in. Her voice wasn't raised, but it cracked like ice under weight. I didn't even know she could do that. The room held its breath. Rowan noticed the lines at the edges of Cambria's eyes, carved less by anger than by fear. The judge tapped the gavel once. The court will recess. Hearings resume next week. Rain had broken into a downpour. Puddles mirrored the traffic lights fractured into red and green shards. Cambria strode ahead, letting water run freely down her face. She neither lifted her collar nor shielded her eyes. Rowan lingered at the doorway before following. With a soft snap, his umbrella opened. He caught up on the courthouse steps. She didn't look at him. He didn't speak. He only angled the umbrella so the rain no longer struck her shoulders. Cambria released a long breath. Not sharp, just spent. Her posture eased, her hands uncurled. Around them, the storm kept falling loud, everywhere else quiet beneath the shared shelter. They stayed like that, motionless in the rain. By the following week, the storm had passed, though the weight of it hadn't. At the community center, crayons scratched and children's giggles rose across folding tables. Rowan sat between Ellie and Iris, their heads bent over bright paper. The overhead lights flickered faintly, humming like an old lullaby. Clouds pressed low over Seattle, dragging the gray afternoon down. Ellie was sketching a lighthouse again, its yellow beams sweeping over swirls of blue. On Rowan's other side, Iris worked carefully on a field green lines at first, then two small figures slowly taking shape in the center. Cambria lingered near the doorway, arms folded. She didn't interfere, didn't comment, but the brittleness in her stance gave her away. Rowan recognized it. He'd seen the same look in his own mirror once. He drew in a steady breath, though it did nothing to ease the tension in his chest. Since the day Iris had found quiet in his presence, he'd been walking a fraying tightrope, every headline, every glance in the lobby, every whisper tugging at the rope's threads. Iris pressed her tongue to her lip as she shaded in the sky, blue smudges gathering across her fingertips. Rowan knew the cost of silence, the danger of waiting too long. When the girls began tidying their papers, he crossed to Cambria, her eyes fixed on his, already knowing what he meant to say. "If you ask me to walk away," he said quietly, "she'll believe love walks away too." Her jaw tightened, the only crack in her composure. Fingers gripped the strap of her purse until her knuckles blanched. Rowan continued slower now. "I know what she's recovering from. I've lived it through my daughter. Call me janitor, unstable, unfit. I don't care what's written, but I won't be another person who leaves that girl behind." Cambria looked away toward the table where Iris was laughing at something Ellie said. The sound was small, but enough to fracture her mask. She swallowed once. "She sleeps through the night now," she murmured. "No screaming." Rowan gave a faint nod. "That isn't from me. It's from someone staying, someone she trusts not to vanish." Silence stretched between them, raw and fragile. Then Cambria blinked hard and crossed to her daughter, kneeling at her side without a word. Rowan lingered near the exit chest, aching not from strain, but from the clarity of wanting to remain. Out in the hallway, he bent to the vending machine for water. A voice from the lobby television froze him in place. Questions arise about the mental stability of Rowan Keats, a former special education teacher who left the profession following the tragic death of his wife. His photo filled the screen, grainy, taken at the community center, Iris's hand hovering close to his. The headline scrolled beneath "Janitor with troubled past, unsafe for children." The cup slipped from his grasp, cold water streaking his wrist. His pulse hammered louder than the broadcast. They knew, not just his past, but how to wield it. A mother passed behind, catching a glimpse of the screen. Her glance at Rowan lasted only a second, yet carried enough hesitation and suspicion distance. Gregory had moved faster than Rowan expected. This wasn't only about custody anymore. It was demolition. He closed his eyes, letting grief press against him, the same heaviness from the night the monitors went still. The same dread that followed unopened school board letters after his resignation. But beneath the ache, something steadier took root. Not panic, not rage, conviction. He reached forward, silenced the TV with a single push, and turned back toward the room where the girls waited. The boardroom felt colder than usual, glass walls humming faintly as the city pulsed. Gregory stood at the head of the polished table, one hand resting casually on the folder marked with Cambria's name. Daniel Vale had already made himself comfortable across from him, legs crossed, eyes sharp with anticipation. Cambria sat straighter in her chair, though the strain showed in her jaw. Her fingers tight around a pen refused to tremble. "You've been given the draft," Gregory announced, his voice smooth as oil. "All that remains is your signature. For the good of the company, of course." Cambria didn't look at the folder. Her gaze hovered distant like she was trying to hear something beyond the walls. The door clicked open. Everyone turned. Rowan walked in without his janitor's uniform. A fitted button-down shirt sleeves rolled just once, and dark slacks replaced the faded navy blue. He looked nothing like the man pushing a mop cart. He didn't hesitate. "I'd like to speak." Daniel raised a brow and didn't hide the smirk. "You don't belong in this room." Gregory didn't bother to hide his disdain. "Is there no security in this building?" Cambria stayed silent. "I won't take long," Rowan replied, holding his ground. "But someone should say something that isn't rehearsed." Gregory let out a sharp scoff. "By all means, enlighten us. What could a janitor possibly teach about executive leadership?" Rowan's gaze didn't waver. "Nothing. But I know the look of fear. I've seen it in the eyes of a child who isn't sure anyone will stay." Daniel leaned forward, voice clipped. "You have no place in Iris's life. She doesn't even know who you are." Before Rowan could speak, a small voice drifted through the half-open boardroom door. "I do." Every head turned. Iris stood there, half hidden behind Ellie, who gripped her hand tight. One of Cambria's assistants hurried after them, but Iris stepped past, pale and trembling, her eyes locked on Rowan. "You're blue," she whispered. Cambria's breath caught. The pen slipped from her fingers and hit the table. Daniel stiffened. "Iris, go back, no." Her chin rose, slightly fragile yet steady. "He's blue. He makes the sky quiet." The room stilled. No one moved. Gregory found his voice first. "A child's fantasy. That won't stand in court." Rowan lowered himself onto one knee, careful, meeting her eyes from across the room. "It's all right. You don't have to explain." Ellie lifted one of Iris's drawings. 3 stick figures held hands beneath a sky washed in blue crayon. A sun, a tree. The caption read in uneven block letters, "Safe place." Rowan didn't so much as glance at Daniel. He didn't need to. Gregory's jaw tightened. "A drawing doesn't erase your record. We all know you quit teaching after your wife died. Couldn't hold yourself together." Rowan rose slowly. "You're right. I broke. I fell apart. And I rebuilt piece by piece. I still am. But that little girl trusts me. That's not something I take lightly." Cambria hadn't spoken until now. She pushed to her feet, her tone quiet but cutting. "Gregory, that's enough." He turned, ready to retort, but she cut him off. "Do you think I care more about a headline than my daughter's voice?" Daniel surged to his feet, defensive. "You're being emotional." "No," Cambria answered, eyes fixed on him. "I'm being her mother." The words struck like a snapped wire. Daniel faltered, stunned into silence. The wind rose against the glass. Seattle's gray sky pressed down, but the tension in the room had shifted. Rowan felt it in his chest, something loosening, something uncoiling. Cambria turned to him, still composed, but her voice wavered faintly. "Are you sure you're ready for what comes next?" He gave no answer, only a firm nod. Somewhere behind them, a camera shutter clicked. Gregory, of course. The lens caught Iris's drawing, still on the table, and Rowan standing at Cambria's side. By the next morning, that photo was everywhere. It stared at Rowan from a neighbor's phone in the elevator, then again from the glowing screen at the corner store, and once more on the bus ride to work. Headlines multiplied faster than coffee steam. CEO Cambria Rhoades spotted in intimate setting with janitor and children. What's the real story? The image looked staged, almost tender. Cambria, kneeling in dirt. Rowan beside her, the girls between them. But Rowan knew the truth. It wasn't staged. The world didn't care. Her eyes moved to the CC field. There it was, another address. The thread had been forwarded to an external PR firm. One linked to Daniel Vale's holdings. Rowan sat across from her in silence. He'd read the same lines moments before. Now he leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling like it might collapse. "So it was both of them," he said finally. "Gregory's smear campaign, funded by her own ex." Cambria didn't blink. Her jaw clenched. "They're not trying to take my daughter. They're trying to erase me." Ellie and Iris played in the next room, their giggles a soft hum that made the weight in the air feel stranger still. "I should have known," Cambria said. "Daniel never cared about custody until I stopped letting him control the story. And Gregory, he's been waiting for this for years." Rowan shook his head. And now we're the distraction, the headline that makes you look weak. The thought pressed against him like a tightening collar. He wasn't just in over his head, he was caught between two powerful men and the woman they wanted to destroy. His mind flashed to Ellie at school, to her careful sketches, to the way she clung to Iris like a secret sister. He thought of Iris herself, whispering blue as though the word alone might keep her safe. But the city didn't care about whispers. It cared about optics. By mid-afternoon, news vans clogged the curb at the Rhoades Biomedical Tower. Protesters gathered in a dense wall, voices sharp and angry. Some shouted for accountability, others raised signs that blurred into one cutting refrain: "Fire the janitor. Save the child. Emotion isn't leadership." Security doubled. Cameras went dark in private wings. Board members spoke in half-tones in the halls. Even Cambria's assistant, usually unshakable, avoided her eyes. And still the emails spread. When Rowan walked Ellie to school, the stares followed. That's him, the janitor from the story. His wife died, didn't she? Some kind of breakdown. Poor kid. Imagine the damage. He kept silent, only tightening his grip on Ellie's hand. But he knew this was nothing he could outwalk. At the foundation's back entrance, Cambria waited. No blazer, no makeup, her hair tied back and face pale. Armor gone. Iris asked if she could see you again, she said. Rowan looked down the corridor. Is that safe? I don't know, she admitted. But it might be necessary. They entered the small rec room where Iris and Ellie sat with markers scattered across the table. Above them, a muted TV scrolled headlines like "Waves Unstable Janitor at Center of Corporate Scandal." Mother or CEO Cambria Rhoades questioned. Ellie lifted her latest drawing, 4 figures, beneath a tree sunlight. Overhead, one word scrawled in bold blue: safe. Beside her, Iris added a butterfly, her hand trembling, but determined. Rowan knelt close. That's beautiful. I don't want the blue to go away, Iris whispered, repeating it like a prayer. Resolve hardened in his chest. There was no retreat left. A knock broke the stillness. One of Cambria's staff stepped in, eyes wide. They've moved the emergency vote up. 30 minutes. Of course, Cambria muttered. They want to finish this fast. Rowan pushed to his feet, jaw set. Let them try. Cambria studied him, and for the first time her composure faltered. You realize what this means for you, I do. And you'll still walk into that boardroom. He didn't hesitate. I already walked through hell when I lost my wife. This is just another hallway. The girls said nothing, only stared with wide eyes. The roar of protest shook the glass, a heavy thud, rattling the front doors. Iris clutched Ellie's hand. Their drawing spread across the table, sky shaded in blue from edge to edge. Rowan fixed his gaze on it, steadying his breath as the pounding grew louder. The hearing room felt colder than it should have, though it had nothing to do with temperature. Murmurs dwindled as Rowan stepped forward, eyes sweeping the semicircle of board members. His hands trembled, not from fear, he had moved past that, but from the weight of speaking aloud. He wasn't in uniform today. A pale blue shirt sleeves, rolled collar, slightly creased, left him looking both out of place and strangely grounded in the polished chamber. No notes, no lawyer, just memory. I wasn't supposed to be here, he began, his voice rough. Not in this building, not in Iris's life. Gregory exhaled loudly from the far end. Then why don't we fix that? A ripple of chuckles. Rowan didn't react. His eyes stayed on Cambria, then flicked briefly toward Daniel Vale, who lounged with folded arms and crossed legs, savoring the stage. I was a special ed teacher before this, Rowan said. Until my wife passed, I lost more than her. I lost the part of me that believed I could help anyone. So I swept floors instead. Easier than risking failure with someone else's child. Cambria blinked, once her face unreadable, but her knuckles whitened against the armrest. I didn't plan to get involved, Rowan continued, but I saw a girl on the floor covering her ears. No one moved. They were afraid of doing the wrong thing. I was too. But I remembered what worked with my daughter. I blew bubbles. That's all. Gregory snorted. Want a medal for babysitting with soap? Rowan ignored him. Iris looked at those bubbles like they were the first quiet things she'd been given all day. She breathed, and for once so did everyone else. From the back a woman stood. PTA badge gleamed on her chest. I was there. He didn't push her. He waited, then let her come to him. Another parent rose. My son said Iris gave him a blue crayon. That's never happened. She ate lunch with my daughter last week. She joined a game of tag. One voice after another filled the space. Rowan stayed still, arms loose, gaze lowered, yet something eased within him, not pride but breath. Room, Daniel scoffed. Anecdotes, sentiment. None of this qualifies him to be near my child. Cambria leaned forward. Neither did you, apparently. His jaw tightened. Rowan turned toward him. You keep saying she's your daughter, but Iris never speaks your name. The glare in his eyes darkened. Because you've manipulated her. I haven't told her anything, Rowan replied. I just showed up. More than some can say. Gregory slammed his pen against the table. We're not here to indulge feelings. We're here to decide if Cambria Rhoades is still fit to lead this company. Someone murmured at the far end, leadership means knowing who to trust. Cambria rose. No notes in her hands. She didn't need them. I let Rowan near my daughter not because I was desperate, but because I was finally willing to see past control. I saw Iris respond to him. I saw her begin to speak in her way. She turned to Daniel. I've lived with Iris every day. You've only appeared when it suited you. He opened his mouth, but another voice came first, small, certain, from the hallway. Blue. Every head turned. Cambria stiffened. Gregory frowned. Iris stepped in Ellie beside her. She fixed her gaze on Rowan. You're blue. Daniel surged to his feet. Iris back no. Her voice was thin, steady. She crossed the room, opened her notebook, and laid a drawing on the table. 3 figures held hands beneath a streaked sky of blue. That's my safe, Gregory sneered. Emotional theater. Cambria's reply was quiet, and still more honest than anything you've said in weeks. Daniel's palm slammed the table, the crack echoing like a whip. This is absurd. But no one looked at him now. Every eye fixed on the girl with the drawing, while Rowan stood motionless, breath caught the sound of Daniel's hand still ringing in the chamber. The chamber carried a breathless weight like a storm pressing against glass. Every seat was filled. Reporters lined the back wall, fingers hovering over recorders. Daniel Vale stood near the bench with his high-profile attorney, their table stacked with files, timelines, surveillance prints, evidence polished to a sheen. Across the aisle, Cambria sat, rigid hands locked in her lap. Her blazer was immaculate hair, neatly twisted, but her eyes betrayed the toll of sleepless weeks. Rowan sat behind her with Ellie, uncertain if his presence steadied her or only fed the whispers. Gregory entered with cameras trailing. He exchanged nods with board members scattered among the public seats. One shook his hand. Another snapped a photo. No pretense of neutrality left. The judge flipped through a thick file. The gavel hadn't struck, but the verdict already loomed. When Rowan was called forward, he carried no notes. No credentials, no lawyer by his side. Just memory, raw and steady. He stepped into the center, glanced at Cambria, then down at Iris, seated beside Ellie, their legs swinging in imperfect rhythm. I'm not here as a teacher or a janitor, he said, voice rough. I'm here as a father who lost and as a man who refused to stop showing up when someone needed it most. His hands gripped the table, though his tone held firm. When my wife died, I broke in ways I couldn't name. I thought strength meant fixing everything, but sometimes all a child needs is someone who stays, who listens, who waits. Gregory scoffed loudly. Daniel leaned toward his lawyer, whispering. The judge lifted her gaze. Do you have any evidence, any documented change that connects directly to your presence? Rowan looked toward the gallery. A woman stood, then another. A father next. Parents from the playground, the garden, the library. One by one, they stepped forward. My daughter never shared before, a mother said, but Iris offered her snack last week. A father added. She grabbed Rowan's sleeve when a balloon burst. She didn't run. She stayed. Others spoke in turn. Their words weren't scientific reports, but together they formed a quiet truth color, returning to a child's world gesture by gesture. Then Iris rose. Not called, not prompted. She carried a folded page, her steps soft but sure. Her hands shook, yet her chin held high. She stopped before the judge, eyes unblinking. She opened the paper. A rainbow arched overhead. Beneath it stood 3 figures, one in a red dress, one with glasses, one with messy curls. In the corner, a smaller figure drew another rainbow. This is family, she said, voice so faint the judge leaned closer to catch it. Daniel barked a laugh sharp as glass. Your Honor, we can't decide custody on children's scribbles. The judge raised a hand silencing him, but the shift had already happened. No one looked at the files anymore. They looked at Iris not as an exhibit, but as a girl claiming her safety and color and courage. Cambria's breath hitched. Rowan stayed still. Ellie squeezed Iris's hand. After a long pause, the judge spoke with quiet clarity. Custody remains with Ms. Rhoades. Mr. Vale, further contact will be supervised pending psychological evaluation. Mr. Brandt, an investigation into media interference, will proceed. The silence cracked. Daniel lurched to his feet, knocking his chair. Gregory went pale, tugging at his tie. Beyond the windows, cameras flashed like lightning. Security moved the press toward the exits. Rowan stayed where he was until Iris returned to her seat, clutching her drawing as if it were armor. When the doors opened, the crowd had doubled. Signs swayed, some offering support, others demanding removal. Flash bulbs flared. Microphones thrust forward. Cambria emerged first, face unreadable. Iris clung to her hand. Rowan followed with Ellie, guiding both girls through the storm of noise. For a moment, the four of them walked together, unlabeled, unclassified. Iris looked up at Rowan and whispered, "We're still under the rainbow, right?" He bent his head once, unable to form words. Behind them, the doors of the courthouse shut with a hollow thud, muffling the roar. Rowan tightened his grip on Ellie's shoulder as they pushed through the crush of cameras, rain beginning to fall in fine needles against the steps. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant echo of rain tapping against the window panes. Rowan sat at the kitchen table, elbows resting on the scratched wooden surface, eyes fixed on the picture frame in front of him. Behind him, Ellie slept curled into the couch cushions, wrapped in her favorite quilt. Her hand still clutched the drawing Iris had given her that morning, a rainbow stretching across three small figures. She'd fallen asleep mid-sentence, the words, "Do you think Iris dreams in colors," now still hanging somewhere in the air. Rowan exhaled slowly. He reached out and touched the edge of the frame. His thumb lingered on the glass. "You told me not to run," he whispered. His voice cracked, too soft to stir Ellie. "Not to disappear into my own grief. I tried. God, I tried. But I didn't know if I could be enough." The words sat between him and the photo like truth finally spoken aloud. His shoulders loosened as if a rope had snapped. "I stayed," he said, quieter this time. "I stayed." For the first time in years, the tears that came weren't driven by guilt or longing, but by something gentler, release. He let them fall. No shame. No need to hide them in a bathroom mirror or behind a locked bedroom door. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his shirt and leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath him. The rain softened, shifting into a whisper across the rooftop. The pain of losing her hadn't disappeared. It never would. But something had shifted within him. For so long, he had equated value with productivity, being a teacher, a provider, someone with letters behind his name. But Iris hadn't needed a certified therapist. Ellie never asked for a hero. They needed someone present. That was it. Present. He picked up the frame again and studied her face, frozen in the moment, before the sickness took hold, before the silence in their home grew unbearable. "I'll never stop missing you," he murmured. "But I'm not broken because you're gone. Just changed." Then gently he folded the small metal stand on the back of the frame and slid it into the drawer beside the stove. He didn't bury it, just tucked it away like a chapter, honored but complete. He stood and crossed the room to adjust Ellie's blanket, brushing her curls off her forehead. She stirred but didn't wake. That's when the knock came, soft, hesitant. He paused, unsure if it was real, until it came again. He opened the door without checking the peephole. Cambria stood there, her coat clinging damp to her shoulders, a fabric tote bag pressed against her side. Her hair, usually immaculate, hung loose and damp, curling at the ends. "I didn't mean to wake anyone," she said quietly. Iris wanted Ellie to have these. She held up the bag, slightly unsure if she should come in or turn away. Rowan stepped aside without a word, and she entered slowly, her steps cautious like someone entering sacred space. He took the bag from her and peeked inside. 3 picture books, all dog-eared, all clearly loved. One had a post-it note stuck on the front. "The blue one is Ellie's now." Cambria's eyes drifted toward the couch. She spotted the 2 small figures, tangled in blankets and crayons, and something in her face softened. Iris asked if we could read those together next week, she said. If, if that's still okay. Rowan nodded. Of course. She lingered near the doorway, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her coat sleeve. It's quiet here, she said after a beat. Peaceful. Rowan offered a half smile. Sometimes too quiet. Cambria looked at him, then not as the CEO, not as the guarded woman fighting legal wars, but as someone who had finally stopped bracing for impact. You look lighter, she said. I am, he replied. Or maybe just tired in a different way. She gave a soft, almost imperceptible chuckle. That makes two of us. They stood there for a moment, neither rushing to leave, neither forcing the silence to fill with something clever. It was the kind of quiet born from understanding from shared weight. As she turned to go, she paused at the door. Thank you, Rowan, for staying. He didn't say anything back, just nodded once slowly. Then she stepped into the hallway, leaving behind the scent of rain and old pages. He closed the door gently, the latch clicking into place. When he looked back at the couch, Ellie had rolled over, still hugging the rainbow drawing to her chest. Rowan reached for the books, set them carefully on the table, and sat down again. He didn't pick up the picture frame this time. He didn't need to. He was already here. The news broke on a Monday morning. Gregory Brandt, former head of PR at Norvell Biogen, was officially suspended pending federal investigation. Multiple outlets confirmed he had paid third-party media firms to publish misleading stories, stage photo leaks, and ghost-wrote anonymous tips to tabloids, each one designed to fracture Cambria's credibility, and by extension, her custody case. The real twist, though, lay deeper. Public records revealed financial ties between Gregory and Daniel Vail's investment shell companies. While Vail denied knowledge, he quietly withdrew his legal suit and released a statement citing concern for Iris's emotional stability. The business community, once eager to prop him up as a reformed innovator, turned its back. Stockholders pulled away. Speaking invitations vanished. His name dissolved into search engine shadows. Cambria sat at the end of a long conference table 2 days later, facing the corporate board she had once commanded with precision. But she wasn't in a power suit. A soft blue button-down shirt replaced her usual blazer. Her hair was pinned back loosely, and Iris sat quietly beside her, holding a worn plush rabbit in her lap. One board member, an older man in tortoiseshell glasses, leaned forward. Ms. Rhoades, the question remains. How do you intend to repair the public image of this company? Cambria folded her hands. She didn't blink. I don't, she said. Not in the way you expect. A murmur rustled through the room. Someone shifted in their seat. A woman in the third chair frowned. Cambria continued, voice steady. For years, I was everything you wanted. Polished, strategic, unattached. I sold a version of control that looked like leadership. But if leading this company means severing the only honest connection I've built with my daughter, then I don't want the job. She looked down at Iris, who glanced up and nodded, barely perceptible. I'm still willing to lead, but not as the person you molded. If that's unacceptable, I'll step aside. Silence settled thick as snowfall. No one clapped. No one applauded. A few gathered their things. One left without a word. But several others remained seated, eyes thoughtful, brows furrowed. Cambria stood. She didn't wait for a verdict. She simply took Iris's hand and walked out. Later that afternoon, as the autumn sun began to dip, Rowan held the door open to his truck, while Ellie and Iris clambered down, each gripping a bag of crayons and fruit snacks. They stood before a small building at the edge of a quiet street. The old bricks were chipped paint peeling in places, but the bones were strong. Sunlight spilled across the front steps like an invitation. A tilted for lease sign hung in the window, its corners curled from wind. Rowan stepped back and let the girls explore. Ellie ran her fingers along the dusty window ledge. Iris peeked through a cracked glass pane, then tapped gently at a spiderweb in the corner. He turned to Cambria, who had followed a few steps behind. She carried a folder under her arm, city codes, possible permits, a rough cost estimate for renovation. I used to dream about a place like this, Rowan said. Not a school, not therapy, just somewhere children could be seen without labels, without checklists. Cambria studied the building, then the two girls spinning around in a puddle of golden leaves. It won't be easy, she said. It won't be expensive either, he replied. It'll be something better. Honest. She didn't answer immediately. Then she opened the folder and slid it into his hand. I already filed a zoning inquiry this morning, she said. In my name, but I figured you'd add yours. Rowan looked at the forms, then back at her. You're really doing this, I told the board I'd stop pretending, she said. This felt like a good place to start. The wind picked up slightly, rustling Ellie's hair. Iris wandered back, holding a rock shaped like a heart. She handed it silently to Rowan, who took it without comment and tucked it into his coat pocket. They stood there a moment longer, four people no longer hiding, no longer chasing approval, just breathing the same air in front of a building that might one day carry more than just bricks. The light through the front windows turned golden in the late Seattle afternoon, pooling across the newly laid floorboards and catching the bright edges of paper stars taped to the glass. Rowan knelt beside Ellie and Iris, one hand steadying the edge of a paint cup, while the other guided a brush across the window pane. The girls giggled as blue, red, and yellow streaks bloomed under their strokes, clumsy, joyful bursts of color. Behind them, Cambria stood with a splash of orange paint across her sleeve, her arms crossed loosely as she watched the scene unfold. She wasn't giving instructions. She wasn't monitoring behavior. She just smiled, soft, genuine, a kind of quiet relief settling in her shoulders. The building had changed more than its structure. What had once been an abandoned lot with flaking paint and broken windows now held the soft murmur of children's voices, the rustle of turning pages, the smell of fresh glue and acrylic. The walls were covered in butcher paper, scrawled with drawings, early sentences, misshapen hearts. In one corner, beanbags circled a bookshelf. In another, a round table littered with crayons and stickers. The sign above the front door, hand-carved and imperfect, read, "The Rowan Keats Room." Parents began to arrive, some with strollers, others carrying backpacks or holding small hands. No one asked for intake forms or diagnoses. No one brought checklists. They only asked, what color does your child like, or where would they feel most comfortable? A boy in a red hoodie settled near the reading corner and picked up a dinosaur book. A girl in polka dot leggings curled up near the window with a stuffed bear. Another child began quietly tracing spirals with chalk on the sidewalk, no one stopping them. Rowan leaned back from the painted star and wiped his hands on his jeans. Ellie beamed at the streaks they had made together. Look, Daddy, that one's blue like Iris's favorite. He nodded, glancing sideways. Iris for once didn't shrink under the attention. She dipped her brush in green and added a curved line beneath the star. Cambria stepped forward, handing Rowan a fresh rag. He took it, chuckling, as she raised her eyebrows at the smear of blue on his cheek. Iris said she wants to paint every window by next week, she said, half laughing. That sounds like a solid strategic plan, he replied. Very marketable. She rolled her eyes. Don't start with the business lingo again. He didn't. Instead, he looked around the room at the floor he had helped sweep, the bookshelves they had scavenged, and repainted the way the space had filled, not just with kids, but with belonging. It wasn't polished, it wasn't loud, but it was enough. Cambria's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it, then silenced the screen without reading. Important, he asked. Nope, she said. Not today. Near the back wall, Iris stepped up to a new piece of paper taped above a bookshelf. With care, she pinned something she had been holding all afternoon, a familiar drawing faded slightly at the edges. A rainbow stretched across the page, its colors imperfect but sincere. Underneath, four small figures stood holding hands. One wore glasses, one had curly hair, one wore a red skirt, one had a green backpack. Above them, scrawled in blocky letters with uneven spacing, "Home." Rowan didn't say anything. He just watched, heart catching in his throat, as Iris turned, gave a shy nod, and walked back to Ellie without a word. It wasn't just a drawing, it was a declaration. It was trust made visible. Cambria noticed too. Her hand found Rowan's elbow, just a brush of touch, but he didn't flinch. Later, as the last children trickled out and the room settled into soft quiet, Rowan stood by the window watching the sky bleed orange behind the city skyline. The paint on the glass had dried, the blue star catching a beam of sun and scattering it across the floor. He placed a hand on the frame, and for a moment his reflection merged with the colors on the window. Not a shadow behind glass, but part of the mosaic. No longer invisible. No longer trying to prove himself worthy of being seen. Just present. The door creaked behind him as Ellie tugged on his sleeve. Dad, she whispered, holding up a book. Can we read it here? He looked down at her, then over at Cambria, who had curled up on the beanbag beside Iris, leafing through a picture book about galaxies. Yeah, Rowan said, sitting down beside Ellie. Right here's perfect. The pages opened. The colors stayed. And outside, the fading light caught every corner of the Ward Keats room, turning even the chipped bricks into something golden. Not every hero carries a title, and not every family begins in blood. Sometimes it starts with a paper star on a window, and someone who refuses to stop showing up. Rowan didn't fight to be extraordinary. He fought to be there even when the world said he wasn't enough. And maybe in a world obsessed with success, the bravest thing we can do is choose presence over perfection. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit follow, because there's always another story waiting to be told.